It started like any ordinary weekend morning. The sun was shining bright, and my solar panels were doing their job perfectly, feeding clean energy into my home and storing the excess in the backup battery. Living in a suburban neighborhood run by an HOA had its challenges, but I was proud of the independence my solar setup gave me. It was an investment, both financially and environmentally, and it gave me a sense of control. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. The first sign that something wasn't right came in the form of an unusually high energy draw on my monitoring app. The numbers didn't add up. My house wasn't consuming nearly as much energy as the app suggested. I double-checked everything, appliances, HVAC, even the electric water heater, but nothing seemed out of place. My system should have been in surplus, yet my battery percentage was dropping faster than expected. I assumed it was a software glitch and decided to keep an eye on it. Later that afternoon, as I took my usual walk around the block, I noticed something strange. My neighbor Karen's Tesla sat parked in her driveway, plugged into an extension cord that ran awkwardly along the edge of her property line. That in itself wasn't unusual, people charged their cars all the time. But what caught my attention was where that cord ended, near the small access panel by my side fence, the one that connected to my outdoor outlet. I froze for a second, staring at the bright orange cord feeding electricity directly from my grid to her car. I walked closer, pretending to admire my garden, and confirmed what I feared. She was stealing power from my solar grid. I couldn't believe it. Karen was one of those HOA board members who constantly complained about everyone else breaking rules, from lawn height to mailbox colors. She had reported me once for having my trash bin out for an extra hour on collection day. And now, here she was, helping herself to my electricity as if it were her right. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I unplugged the cord and went back inside to think. Maybe it was a one-time emergency, I told myself. Maybe her power was out, and she didn't have the courtesy to ask. Still, the audacity of it all nagged at me. That night, I checked my security camera footage. There she was, in broad daylight, dragging the cord across the yard and plugging it into my outlet like it was nothing. No hesitation, no guilt. She didn't even glance around to see if anyone was watching. I went to bed angry, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. The next day, however, the cord was back. This time, I unplugged it again and left a note, "Please do not use my outlet without permission." I kept it short and polite. Surely, that would solve the problem. But the next day, the cord was there again, this time plugged in deeper like she was trying to make it harder for me to remove. The note was gone. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. Karen knew exactly what she was doing, and she wasn't planning to stop. She was stealing my power, my solar energy that I paid thousands to install, and she thought she could get away with it because of who she was. After all, she was on the HOA board, and people like her were used to bending rules in their favor that I started feeling a mix of anger and determination. If she wanted to play this game, fine. I would play too, but on my terms. I decided to dig deeper and see how much power she had taken so far. The answer made my blood boil, several kilowatt hours over the past week. That wasn't just pennies, it was real money, and it was my energy being drained while she smugly drove around town in her electric car. By the end of that week, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this slide. Karen had crossed a line, and if the HOA wasn't going to enforce rules against their own members, I would have to handle this myself. As I sat in front of my energy control dashboard, an idea formed. A bold, dangerous idea that would not only stop her but make sure she never tried this again. And so, the plan began to take shape. The next morning, I woke up with one goal in mind, to take control of this situation once and for all. I had already given Karen a chance to do the right thing, and she had thrown it back in my face. If she thought she could take advantage of me, she had severely underestimated who she was dealing with. I began by researching my solar system settings. My setup was advanced, a smart inverter connected to a monitoring dashboard that allowed me to track, limit, and even adjust voltage output. The system was designed for flexibility and efficiency, but in the wrong hands, it could be a weapon. And I was about to use it as one. Before doing anything drastic, I needed to confirm that Karen was still stealing my power. So, I left for work as usual but kept my security cameras running with motion alerts active. Sure enough, at around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. I opened the live feed and there she was, calm as ever, dragging that same orange extension cord across the grass like she owned the place. She didn't even glance toward my house. She simply plugged in her Tesla and walked away as if nothing was wrong. My blood boiled. This wasn't desperation. This was entitlement at its peak. Karen had no shame, no fear, and absolutely no respect for boundaries. That made my decision even easier. When I got home that evening, I went straight to my energy dashboard. From there, I could see exactly how much current was flowing through the outdoor outlet. It was more than I expected. Her Tesla was pulling a steady charge, draining my system while I sat there helpless. Or at least, that's what she thought that I dug deeper into the settings. There was a mode called surge optimization, which temporarily increased voltage during peak sunlight hours to balance the load. It was meant for performance testing and grid stability, but with a few adjustments, I could override the timer and activate it manually. The result? A sudden spike in voltage, harmless to most household devices, but an electric car battery would react very differently. I sat back in my chair, thinking it through. Was this going too far? Maybe. But then I remembered every note she ignored, every time she looked down on other neighbors for minor infractions, and every smug smile she wore during HOA meetings. Karen believed rules didn't apply to her. It was time someone reminded her otherwise. Still, I needed proof. If this escalated, and I knew it would, I wanted undeniable evidence. So, I installed a small smart plug on the outlet, one that recorded energy usage in real time. Then I angled a camera directly at the panel to capture every connection she made. There would be no, she said, when this was over. The next part was patience. I had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. I wanted her car fully connected, drawing maximum power, so the impact would be immediate and impossible to ignore. That meant waiting for a sunny afternoon when my solar panels were generating at full capacity. As luck would have it, the forecast predicted clear skies for the weekend. That gave me time to prepare. I spent the next 2 days refining my settings, running simulations, and even testing the surge on my own backup battery just to ensure nothing on my end would fry. When I was satisfied everything was safe for my equipment, I saved the configuration under a custom label, Surge Mode, Manual. By Saturday morning, the stage was set. I started my day as usual, acting as if nothing was wrong. Karen, oblivious to the storm brewing in the background, went about her morning routine too. Around 9:30 a.m., just as I predicted, the notification popped up, motion detected near the side fence. I opened the camera feed and saw her dragging that same orange cord again, casual as ever. She plugged it in and walked away, leaving her Tesla to drink from my solar grid without a care in the world. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I sat down at my desk, opened the dashboard, and hovered over the Activate button. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a mix of adrenaline and anticipation. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about principle. About showing her that actions have consequences. With one deep breath, I clicked the button. The system hummed as the voltage spiked, sending a surge of power down the line. It was subtle, invisible to the eye, but I knew the effect would be immediate. My monitor showed a sharp increase in current flow toward the outlet, pushing Karen's car to its limit. I didn't know how long it would take for her to notice, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be long. I leaned back, watching the numbers climb, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt in control again. Little did I know, This was just the beginning. The surge ran through my system like a silent storm, invisible yet powerful. From the monitoring dashboard, I could see the immediate effects. The charging rate on Karen's Tesla spiked far beyond the normal range, and for a brief moment, the numbers almost looked unreal. Then, they stabilized at an elevated level, a clear sign that the car was being forced to handle far more than it was designed for. I waited, glued to the live feed from my security camera. Her driveway looked quiet, the sleek black Tesla sitting motionless under the morning sun, tethered to my outlet like a parasite. There was no sign of Karen. She was probably inside, sipping her coffee, completely oblivious to what was happening to her prized electric car. Minutes passed, and then something changed. The indicator lights on the Tesla began to flash erratically. I couldn't hear the sound from this distance, but I imagined the faint hum turning into a high-pitched whine as the battery system struggled to cope with the sudden surge. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. This wasn't destruction, at least, not yet. It was discomfort, a reminder that nothing she took for granted was safe from consequences. My phone buzzed again, another motion alert. Karen had stepped outside, phone in hand, her expression casual at first, then gradually shifting to something else as her eyes locked on the car. She moved closer, crouching near the charging port, probably reading whatever warning message was flashing on her Tesla screen. I could almost picture her frustration building as she tapped the screen repeatedly, expecting it to fix itself. After a minute of fiddling, she yanked the charging cable out of the car and stood there staring at it like it had personally betrayed her. Then, without even glancing toward my house, she stormed inside, dragging the cord with her. The entire scene played out in silence on my screen, but I didn't need audio to feel the tension. My little experiment had worked. She knew something was wrong, and that it wasn't going to be an easy fix. I let the surge mode run for a few minutes longer before deactivating it and returning my system to normal. There was no point in pushing too far, too fast. The goal wasn't to destroy her car, that would cross a line. The goal was to make her think twice, to make her wonder if maybe stealing electricity wasn't worth the trouble. For the rest of the day, I monitored my system. There were no new spikes, no unexpected draws. Karen didn't come back outside, and the Tesla stayed parked, disconnected and quiet. By evening, I started to think maybe the message had landed. Maybe this would be the end of it. But I underestimated her. The next morning, the orange extension cord was back. I couldn't believe my eyes. After everything that happened, after whatever warnings her car had thrown at her, she was still doing it. That level of audacity was almost impressive. Almost. Instead of anger, I felt something different this time, resolve. If the first surge wasn't enough to deter her, the next one would leave no room for doubt. Before making my next move, I decided to check the footage again, just to confirm the timeline. That's when I noticed something that made me pause. Karen wasn't just plugging in and walking away this time. She kept looking over her shoulder, scanning the neighborhood like she knew someone was watching. And then, halfway through connecting the cord, she took out her phone and snapped a picture of the outlet. That sent a chill down my spine. Why was she taking pictures? Was she planning to report me to the HOA? Claim the outlet was somehow shared property? Or worse, accuse me of tampering with her car? The thought of dealing with an HOA board stacked with Karen's friends made my stomach twist. She wouldn't hesitate to spin this situation in her favor if it meant keeping control. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a petty neighbor feud anymore. This was a battle of narratives, and Karen was already setting hers up. If I wasn't careful, I could end up being painted as the villain, the unreasonable neighbor who sabotaged her electric car for no reason. I needed to stay ahead of her. That meant more than just surges. It meant proof. Hard evidence that she had been stealing from me repeatedly, that I had warned her, and that she had ignored every attempt at resolution. So, I doubled down on my surveillance setup. I added another camera angle to capture her entire approach, timestamped every energy log, and stored every video clip in a separate folder. If this turned into a legal fight, I wanted an airtight case. But Karen wasn't going to stop, and neither was I. That night, as I sat in front of my glowing dashboard, I adjusted the surge settings again, this time pushing the limits even further. The next time she plugged in, the consequences would be unforgettable. Not catastrophic, but enough to make her think the outlet was cursed. By now, this had become more than revenge. It was a game of psychological warfare, and I was ready to win. I didn't have to wait long. Sunday morning broke with the kind of quiet that made everything feel too calm, almost like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. I sat by the window, sipping my coffee, pretending to scroll through my phone, but my real focus was on the security feed running silently on my laptop. I knew it was only a matter of time before Karen made her move again. People like her didn't back down, they doubled down. Sure enough, at 9:47 a.m., the alert popped up. Motion detected. I opened the feed, and there she was, striding across her driveway with that same orange extension cord in her hand. This time, her movements were sharper, more deliberate, like someone trying to reassert control. She crouched near the outlet, plugged the cord in, and stood there for a moment, staring at the Tesla as if daring it to misbehave again. Then she turned and walked back into her house, leaving the car tethered like before. The difference now was that I was ready. I opened my energy dashboard, heart pounding but mind calm. The system was operating at normal output for the moment, quietly feeding her car as if everything was fine. But with a few keystrokes, I switched to my custom surge mode, the one I had refined the night before. This wasn't just a minor bump in voltage anymore. This was the upper edge of what my setup could safely deliver, sustained for as long as I wanted. A calculated strike. Letter telling me to comply with some nonsense rule. Karen wanted to flip the script, to make me the aggressor in this story. But she didn't know what I had. I had weeks of energy logs, showing every unauthorized draw. I had video of her sneaking across property lines, plugging into my outlet without permission. I had timestamps, data, and a neatly written note from my first attempt to resolve this politely. If she wanted a fight, she was going to lose it. Still, I didn't want to get dragged into a public spectacle just yet. So I stayed quiet, watching as Greg examined the outlet with exaggerated seriousness, like it was a crime scene. Then they both walked back toward her driveway, deep in conversation, before disappearing inside her house. I had a feeling they were drafting an email together, the kind that starts with, per HOA guidelines, and ends with an empty threat. What they didn't realize was that the neighborhood was already starting to notice. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed with texts from two different neighbors. Both were variations of the same theme: "Hey, is everything okay with Karen? Saw Greg at her place earlier, and she looked upset." The curiosity was spreading, and in a community where gossip traveled faster than Wi-Fi, it was only a matter of time before everyone knew Karen's Tesla had a meltdown in her driveway. That evening, I walked outside casually, pretending to water my plants, and sure enough, Karen's Tesla was still sitting there, silent, disconnected, and probably nursing an electronic migraine. Karen herself was nowhere in sight, which told me one thing: she was embarrassed. And that, in its own way, was more satisfying than any surge I could deliver, but the battle wasn't over. If Greg was involved, this was going to escalate to the HOA level soon, and Karen wasn't the type to back down quietly. If she couldn't shame me publicly, she would try to punish me through rules and regulations. What she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead. Because if the HOA wanted to play hardball, I was ready to rewrite the entire game. Monday morning arrived with an almost tangible tension in the air. I woke up earlier than usual, partly because I had anticipated what was coming. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee, my inbox pinged with a new email notification, and there it was. The subject line read, "HOA Compliance Notice, Urgent Action Required." I clicked it open, and sure enough, the letter was every bit as sanctimonious as I expected. It began with a generic greeting, followed by a long-winded reminder of community harmony and shared resources. Then came the real kicker. It has come to our attention that you may have engaged in conduct that violates HOA guidelines regarding electrical safety and neighbor cooperation. Please cease all tampering or obstruction of property access. Failure to comply may result in fines or further action. The letter was signed by Greg himself, which confirmed my suspicion that Karen had drafted this email with his blessing. They were framing me as the aggressor, painting a picture where poor Karen was just an innocent neighbor trying to charge her car. The audacity was almost laughable. I set my coffee down and opened the folder I had been compiling for days, Operation Proof. Every energy log, every timestamped screenshot, and every security video clip was neatly organized and labeled. The footage clearly showed Karen trespassing, plugging her cord into my outlet multiple times, and ignoring my written warning. If this escalated to a legal or HOA dispute, my evidence would dismantle their narrative in seconds. But I didn't just want to defend myself. I wanted to make sure Karen understood that her little scheme had backfired spectacularly. So instead of responding angrily, I crafted a calm, professional email with a tone so polished it could have been written by a corporate lawyer. My reply began with a courteous acknowledgement of the HOA's concerns, followed by a statement that I took property boundaries and community rules very seriously. Then, without a hint of aggression, I attached a curated set of evidence, video stills showing Karen dragging the cord across my property, screenshots of my energy monitoring app highlighting the unauthorized power draw, and a copy of the polite note I had left for her days earlier. I ended the email with a single line that changed everything. Please advise on the appropriate next steps for addressing repeated theft of electricity from my private solar grid by another HOA member. Then I hit send and sat back. The silence that followed was almost as satisfying as the voltage surge I had delivered 2 days ago. An hour later, my phone buzzed, not with an email, but with a text from an unknown number. It read, "We need to talk. HOA board meeting at 6 p.m. Attendance mandatory." Mandatory. That word alone told me Greg and Karen weren't expecting this to stay quiet. They wanted an official stage for their little power play. The problem for them was that I had already turned the script upside down. As the day crawled toward evening, I couldn't help but wonder what Karen was thinking. Did she really believe she could spin this in her favor after seeing the evidence? Or was she doubling down out of pride, hoping Greg's position as HOA president would shield her from consequences? Either way, I was ready to dismantle whatever narrative they brought to the table. When I walked into the HOA clubhouse that evening, the room was buzzing with curiosity. Word had spread faster than wildfire, and several neighbors had shown up just to observe. Karen was seated at the long wooden table near the front, arms crossed tightly, her expression a mixture of indignation and forced calm. Greg sat beside her, fiddling with a stack of printed documents like a man trying to look important. The meeting started predictably, with Greg droning on about community values and electrical hazards. Then he launched into a vague accusation about how I had interfered with another member's property, which apparently constituted a violation of HOA rules. He avoided saying Karen's name, but everyone in the room knew who he was talking about. When he finally gave me the floor, I stood, walked to the center, and placed my laptop on the table. Without a word, I clicked play on the first video clip, Karen dragging her orange extension cord across my yard, plugging it into my outlet in broad daylight. Gasps rippled through the room. I followed up with screenshots of my energy logs, showing the exact timestamps and power consumption spikes during her unauthorized charges. Then, for good measure, I displayed a photo of the handwritten note I had left as a warning. When I finished, the silence was deafening. Karen's face had gone pale, her jaw tight as she stared down at the table. Greg cleared his throat, fumbling for words that wouldn't come. Finally, I broke the silence with a calm, measured tone, "Observe." Karen was seated at the long wooden table near the front, arms crossed tightly, her expression a mixture of indignation and forced calm. Greg sat beside her, fiddling with a stack of printed documents like a man trying to look important. The meeting started predictably, with Greg droning on about community values and electrical hazards. Then he launched into a vague accusation about how I had interfered with another member's property, which apparently constituted a violation of HOA rules. He avoided saying Karen's name, but everyone in the room knew who he was talking about. When he finally gave me the one facing consequences. As I walked out of that meeting, the evening air felt lighter somehow. Karen avoided eye contact, her posture stiff, her aura of superiority shattered. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. People like Karen didn't admit defeat easily. She might retreat for now, but she'd be back, with another angle, another scheme. And when she did, I'd be ready. Because the next move? That was mine to make. The HOA meeting was over, but the ripple effect was only beginning. By the next morning, whispers had spread across the entire neighborhood like wildfire. What started as Karen's attempt to paint me as a villain had backfired spectacularly. Everyone now knew the truth: she had been stealing electricity, and I had the receipts to prove it. When I stepped outside to grab the newspaper, 2 neighbors were walking their dogs. They nodded at me with a mix of respect and curiosity, as if I had become some sort of local legend overnight. The man even smirked and said, "Heard you gave someone a shock last night." I just smiled and said nothing. The less I fed the rumor mill, the more powerful the story would become on its own. Karen, on the other hand, was nowhere to be seen. Her driveway looked abandoned, the once proud Tesla sitting silently like a fallen trophy. It wasn't plugged in this time, and from the way it hadn't moved since the weekend, I suspected she was either afraid to charge it or couldn't afford the repairs after my voltage surprise, but I knew Karen too well to think this was over. People like her didn't lick their wounds quietly, they plotted. And when the HOA didn't rally behind her like she expected, her pride must have been burning hotter than ever. She wanted revenge, and I needed to make sure she understood that any attempt to come after me would end the same way this one did, with her losing. That afternoon, I executed the final phase of my plan. For weeks, Karen had treated my solar grid like her personal charging station. Now, I was going to make it clear that not only was that door permanently closed, but trying to open it again would be a mistake she'd never forget. First, I upgraded my outlet security. A heavy-duty smart lock with an encrypted access code went on the outdoor panel. Then, I added a tamper alarm that would send instant alerts to both my phone and the local authorities if anyone tried to bypass it. And for good measure, I installed an inconspicuous warning sign near the outlet: private energy source, unauthorized access will be prosecuted. But I didn't stop there. I took the HOA's own rules and turned them into a weapon Karen couldn't fight against. Using their beloved bylaws, I drafted a formal complaint citing trespassing and unauthorized resource use, complete with the evidence I had already shown at the meeting. I submitted it directly to the HOA board, not because I needed their help, but because it forced them to document Karen's actions in the official record. That meant any future stunt on her part would come with harsher penalties, possibly even legal consequences. And then came the part Karen never saw coming. A week later, the HOA newsletter went out. It was the usual mix of gardening tips and recycling reminders, except for one new section titled Energy Etiquette and Property Boundaries. The article outlined a fresh rule: members must not use another homeowner's utilities without explicit permission. It didn't mention Karen by name, but everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who had inspired the change. Her humiliation was now printed in black and white, delivered to every mailbox on the block. I thought that would be the end of it, but fate had one last twist. A few days later, as I was working in my front yard, I heard the low rumble of a tow truck. I looked up just in time to see Karen's Tesla being winched onto the flatbed. Its sleek black frame now looked tired and lifeless, a far cry from the status symbol it once was. Karen stood nearby, arms folded tightly, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and defeat. She caught me watching and quickly looked away. In that moment, I felt no gloating, no malice, just closure. She had played her game and lost. The car that once made her feel invincible was now being hauled away like a broken appliance. And the best part? I hadn't lifted a finger beyond protecting what was mine. As the tow truck disappeared down the street, I turned back to my solar panels, gleaming under the afternoon sun. My system was intact, my reputation stronger than ever, and Karen? She was the cautionary tale everyone in the neighborhood would whisper about for years to come. And if she ever thought about trying something like this again, all she'd have to do was remember one thing. Some people play by the rules. Others write the rulebook. I smiled, walked inside, and closed the door, knowing I had just written the final chapter in Karen's story.